Hey, welcome back everybody to Backtrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts, Caliban, and never go with a ghost to a second location. I'm joined on this episode by my co-host.
I'm Gooey Fame, and I'm wearing a cool muscle tee.
We have returned to explore the stories behind your favorite Trek shows, and today we're here to talk about an epic tale about a father and his child, of wrongs redressed and bloody revenge, and also a play by some guy named William Shakespeare. It's the classic Elizabethan tragedy Hamlet and the Star Trek The Original Series episode, The Conscience of the King.
Yeah, we got a lot of... there's some good thematic ties here.
How did we take this long, 70 episodes, to get to Shakespeare?
Well, we've covered Shakespeare in a way, right? We did The Tempest, sort of.
We did The Tempest, sort of. That's true. That's true. We did Henry V. Okay, I guess we've done a ton of Shakespeare, but we've never done an episode of Star Trek that is specifically saying, you like Shakespeare? Buckle up.
Yeah, true. This is the
Did you know that the Enterprise has theatrical flats in storage somewhere that they can get out when a traveling troupe of players comes on board and wants to do a show?
That's something consistent throughout all of Starfleet history, it seems. It's like, they're like, you want to do Shakespeare? All right, let's do Shakespeare, you know?
Yeah, it is baked in, I think. And just a small plug for my other show, Enterprising Individuals. We did an episode talking about the links between Star Trek and Shakespeare specifically. And it's even got, not my show, but the subject has its own Wikipedia page. If you go to Wikipedia and you look for Star Trek and Shakespeare, there's a whole page just about that topic. So, once again, we didn't make this up. This is real.
Yeah, I was just saying to my roommate earlier that I think... Shakespeare is, I was saying it's like top 5 things that Trek likes to talk about, but I would say it's in the top 3 of things that Trek likes to bring up a lot.
Definitely 3.
Yeah, like they love it.
What are the other ones? Obliquely Vietnam. They never say, I don't think the word Vietnam is ever said in Star Trek, but there's a lot of like TOS episodes and TNG episodes that are just Vietnam.
/ Cold War, could that be its same
Cold
category?
War, yeah. Or do all the wars go into one line item?
I feel like, there's like a World War II Cold War.
Nazis.
Yeah, so like 20th century war. Boomer wars.
Yeah, like, you got TOS made in the 60s by people that fought in World War II. Later on in the late 90s, and then like the first year of the 2000s, you've got Voyager, a show that went out of its way to have a 2-part episode about fighting Nazis as literal Maquis resistance members in a small European town. So yeah, Nazis are definitely on Trek's brain.
Then the third one, I don't know. I mean, that we talked about the detective stories like in different forms last week. So there's that, right. Sherlock Holmes and like Hammer. But I don't know if that's the top 3.
The typical sort of military story, like not necessarily them fighting the war, but like the way that the military code of justice works and the way that like people, of rank interact with each other. The Worf is like, you can't handle the truth, stories like that. I'm not sure if that all ties into like the idea of it being based on, British naval tradition and Horatio Hornblower and that sort of thing.
What comes up a lot is like Westerns.
Oh, Westerns is, that's in the 5. That's in the top 5 for sure.
Yeah, maybe not 3, but definitely the 5.
And not just, walking into Tombstone and gunning down the gang, but like also a story like Rio Bravo and Rio Grande and like Tales of the Frontier.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the final goal of the podcast should be to come up with the top 10 things Trek is obsessed with.
All right. I think that we could shortlist that. Yeah.
And then we can have our own list of things that we are personally obsessed with, like all the Tom Cruise and like whatever other guys.
The top 5, the top 5 like tenets or subjects of Star Trek, and then like the top 5 subjects that we talk about on this show.
Yeah.
Video games, Tom Cruise. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess we'll probably be around our 100th episode sometime early next year. So maybe that's, we could do that for an anniversary.
Like a special? Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really cool.
All right. Well, I'm going to put that in pencil.
Pencil that in, yeah.
Yeah. A very dark pencil. And we can look at that in the future. But for now, let's get to our featured subject for this week's episode. The play is indeed The Thing. Hamlet, originally published in 1603, is quite possibly the most famous, most performed, and most recognizable play in the Western canon. A sweeping tale of murder, madness, and revenge, it captivated contemporary audiences with its intrigue and bloodshed, but it has remained relevant throughout the centuries for its pithy lyricism, its relatable themes, and its penetrating study of its titular character. Hamlet is the role that all actors covet, the yardstick by which 16 generations of performers have measured their talent, and indeed, the conviction that they bring to their craft. Olivier, Gibson, Branagh, even Ethan Hawke and Steve Coogan have crossed swords with the Dane in the modern era, and in 2009, David Tennant, the classically trained come genre star of the moment, committed to film an adaptation of the Royal Shakespeare Company's production of the Bard's most famous play, Hamlet.
Oh, that this two solid flesh would melt. Oh, and resolve itself into a dew. And that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter, oh God. How weary, stale, flat and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie! It is an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this. But 2 months dead. Nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this, Hyperion to a satyr. So loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly, heaven and earth. Must I remember? Why, she would hang on him, as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on frailty, thy name is woman, a little month. Or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears, why she, even she, oh God, a beast, that once discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with my uncle. My father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules within a month. Ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. Most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good. But break my heart, for I must hold my tongue.
Yeah, and this was a good... I feel like this is a good version for me to see because, like, in all the classes I've ever had to, like, take on Shakespeare and, like, the different adaptations I've seen of different things, I don't think I have ever actually, like, seen Hamlet or, like, known what it's fully about, other than like the like memes about it from cartoons. I say that a lot, but also like, you know, knowing like everyone dies in the end. That's all.
Yeah, right.
That's all I know, you know, is there's like a guy named Yorick and everyone dies. So, but this was a good version to watch because I feel like it was just like, as much it's like, oh, here's a modern adaptation. It is just like, from what I can tell, it's just like, here's the play, but we're wearing suits instead.
Yeah, pretty much. And as far as it goes, this was based on, or was the filmed version of the 2008 production of the RSC's stage show starring David Tennant. I seriously doubt that Patrick Stewart and maybe some others were in it, but I think some cast members were also in it. You might notice that David Ayala is in this, the guy that plays Cleveland Book in Discovery.
Yes. He played two people, right?
Yeah, he played Ronaldo and then one of the Dumb Show characters as well. Yeah. But yeah, and it is this film. I don't know how long the stage version was. The film version is 3 hours long. So I'm glad that you liked it, and I'm glad that you feel like it was a good entry point for you. But I would not necessarily recommend this for somebody who feels completely lost, because this is a very long cut. This isn't the Kenneth Branagh, we're doing every jot and tittle, every single line of the play, and then we're going to have an intermission as well. This is a fairly long cut, and that's fine. I think that it keeps a lot of the character of the show, and that's good. If people haven't seen this, and maybe they haven't because you'd either have to buy it on DVD or if it gets rebroadcast on PBS. I would recommend the Mel Gibson one if you can stomach Mel Gibson, mostly because it is a very clean cut. You know, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, and is a kind of a pared down version of it. But yeah, I do think that this is a pretty good version of the text.
I don't even mean to that I like loved watching this version or anything. I also watched it in 2 different nights. I watched like an hour and a half, and I was like,
that's
all
a
right.
good plan. Yeah.
Yeah, because not that I love watching long movies, but it is kind of a more difficult text just because the prose and stuff is not, you know, everyone talks like Yoda or whatever. So they're like, be kind to me, you must, or something, you know what I mean? So, that's my dumb take on.
Do or do not. Be or not be. Yes.
But yeah, just because there's definitely probably versions of it where, you know, that will go down better for a more modern audience or something like that. Like, I didn't know what they were saying a lot of times too.
Sure.
But I'm like, oh, I know what happened in that scene. You know what I mean? And like,
yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, like it was very watchable, very. I took it in pretty well, but definitely got tripped up a few times. I'm like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I think, well, that's the thing about Shakespeare is that he talks so much. It doesn't really matter if you get all of it. You're like, you'll kind of understand if you just let it kind of draw you along. I think that, really, like, I'm surprised that it took this long. Maybe it was his success stateside as the Doctor in Doctor Who that allowed this to kind of come to fruition. But I do think that Tennant is particularly suited to play this role, and especially at this time as well. And I mean, speaking of his fame stateside, you know, this is essentially a movie where Professor X killed Doctor Who's dad. So we got to see everybody. I'm sure plenty of the best-selling DVD that the BBC's ever sold, probably for that reason.
For sure, nerds probably love this.
Yeah, right. But you know, David Tennant is no stranger to acting on the stage, and also with the Royal Shakespeare Company, to the point where, fun fact, I saw him play Romeo in Romeo and Juliet in London in, I think, like a while ago now, in like the year 2000, I believe.
Oh, that's cool.
And I remember thinking, like, who is this skinny shouting Scot here? Like, there's something about him. I'm not sure he's good for Romeo or the right guy, but he certainly has a lot of charisma. And I wonder what'll happen to him. And then when he was announced to be the new actor playing the Doctor, I was like, oh yeah, it's that guy. Okay, fun, interesting. So yeah, this was done right about the time I think that he was wrapping up his time on Doctor Who.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he brings a lot of energy to this role, which you would need. Hamlet is not always played as sort of manic and energetic as he plays it here, but I think that it fits well the sort of manic space that Hamlet is occupying, especially in the middle of the play when he is he's acting crazy, he's acting a fool, and trying to throw people off.
That's like so that's something I was thinking like, oh, this seems like a fairly, like we just translated this. We didn't, like, when a lot of times when it's like a modern adaptation, it's like we're going to change the dialogue, we're going to make this all fitting to a modern audience, but keep kind of that story and some of the lines. Yeah. You know what I mean? But in this, it was like, I feel like the way just having them dress more modern or whatever in like more familiar situations helps like kind of familiarize or like color the characters, I guess, in a way that is recognizable to me. And so I didn't know how accurate it was, but I felt like Hamlet in this came off as like shitty kid, like fail son kind of guy. Yeah. And like, I don't know if that's, maybe that's not accurate to the play, but I thought that is a really good, like, it made a lot of sense. It really worked with this story that they were telling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Succession didn't invent fail sons, but I think if you were to do this now, if there was and I'm sure somebody's working on it, but if there was a 2022 version of Hamlet, like it would be, Eric Trump or something like that. Or Don Jr. But yeah, I think that totally fits. And, I've thought a lot about this film, just being somebody who has been into Shakespeare since I was just getting into reading and theater. And I've been in the play 3 times. I've played Laertes. I've played Polonius twice. And that was a dual role with the Gravedigger. And I was in a sequel to Hamlet called Fortinbras, and I played Fortinbras.
Oh,
and that is a
modern canon.
No, and it's not Yoda talk either. It's a modern recent play by Lee Blessing, and it's a sequel to Hamlet in which we follow Fortinbras and all of the characters. Not just Hamlet's father, all the characters from the original play return as ghosts, and they all have unfinished business.
Oh my
gosh. They are haunting Fortinbras, trying to get him to do things like Hamlet's father did with Hamlet, and it's a comedy.
That is fun. That's a nice tonal. I did think while watching this a lot of times, like, oh yeah, like I could see like the real modern interpretation of this, like the Hamlet verse or whatever, the Shakespeare verse. Yeah, Hamlet and like I could totally see that, and like how I thought a lot about how a lot of modern retellings or adaptations of anything, like a comic book or a video game or whatever that we talk about, like or even in Star Trek with the Kelvin movies, like how they sometimes caricature things, or like they take some random like throwaway line, or like they take an element from the original work and like just bring it back because it's something you remember, and it's something a wide audience remembers, and it like completely strips it of the context. And I totally was thinking about that when you first see that skull, and I was like, oh, Hamlet's gonna get his famous skull, and that's gonna give him his like power for the rest of this movie.
he's gonna meme it. Yeah.
The skull of Yorick.
Hashtag. Yeah, and people have done that with all of the works of Shakespeare, but certainly the works or the specific work Hamlet, from the Fortinbras thing that I mentioned. There's the very famous play and Gary Oldman movie, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is a comedy that centers around Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and is kind of an existential comedy, because remember, they keep coming in and showing up and going, Hamlet, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. And so this sort of proposes, like, what are they doing when they're off stage waiting to come back on? And so, yeah, there's a lot of, especially in the 20th century, a lot of Shakespeare's canon has been sort of deconstructed in that way. Every time you do Hamlet, and especially now after the 20th century has happened, and you've got visual records of other people's takes on it, you've got to land the take. nobody is just doing unless you, well, I've actually been in a couple productions of Hamlet where they're just trying to do Hamlet, but most people are trying to do a take, like you mentioned, the fail son take or what have you. And this is how would I describe it? I think this is the closest that we could get to them not really doing a take, because I think the RSC does do takes. Someday I'll tell you about the Romeo and Juliet show that I saw at the Barbican and the weird take that they did with that. But I think they're playing it fairly straight. But like you said, they're adding some understandable and familiar, comfortable modern elements. So the idea of spying on people isn't, but you're hiding behind a tapestry or something. It's like a video camera or something like that. Or when Hamlet is sort of talking to himself, they didn't go so far as to, he's like making a vlog, but he is like filming himself. And like so he's talking to a camera to us, but he's also kind of talking to himself. And I wouldn't normally give him a huge compliment, but this was kind of covered in the 2000 Ethan Hawke version of Hamlet, in which he is a rich kid film student in Manhattan who is basically, a filmmaker and doing the same thing. And so a lot of the footage is found footage, and a lot of it is like people eavesdropping through CCTV cameras and things like that. And it's, it was an okay version, but I would like to see somebody really not worry about the text, not worry about giving the young actor he has to nail the to be or not to be speech, not worrying about all that, and like really taking us to, another level of abstraction as far as the staging the film goes. A found footage version, an all text version of Hamlet. LOL. What? Ophelia's dead? It's unhappy face.
Hamlet the game or something.
Hamlet the video game. And every time you get Claudius down to a tenth of his life bar, then a cutscene comes in and he gets to go away. And you're like, no, I almost had him.
You also have to collect like 100 skulls. As like, it's like the side collectible, You're like, right. The shiny skull. Okay.
Right. And then halfway through the game, like you play a game version of the game that you're playing in 8-bit, where it's a play version where so you try to get Claudius to play a game in the game, and he's like, oh no, this game.
Oh yeah, and you could do the play within the play, and you have to act in the play.
Right? Yeah. I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, I'm writing this down as well as Hamlet Untold, my beginning of the Shakespeare verse,
right?
Franchise I'm working on.
The game's afoot. Yes.
But yeah, I did think about like with the other stuff recently we've covered. I tried to like watch other things just for context, and I thought about that with this, but I was like ran out of time, and I'm like, all these. Actually, I didn't run out of time. I told you I played Assassin's Creed 2 all weekend, but I ran out of time. So I was like, I'm not going to watch I have them and I'm ready to watch like these 4-hour versions or whatever. But, that's something that struck me as like, there are a lot of like versions of this. And I thought like, how many did there need to be? I guess like every once in a while, it's good to see a different take on it. But, I thought, when you were talking about like wanting to see something that's totally different, it made me think of like how Forbidden Planet sort of did that with The Tempest. That's kind of a take that could be cool. Is like, it's not even like Hamlet in space, but it's like we have, they're just strongly influenced. Like that could be interesting to see, because I think there is something like, I think we've said it before about like Shakespeare, like the Dickens and stuff. Like some of these are just like pretty classic tales, and I was pretty hooked in by this. Not necessarily this version though. I thought it was pretty good, but like I was like, this story of Hamlet is very interesting. I do like it.
Yeah. The adaptation of those Shakespeare stories into something like Forbidden Planet or Oasis, the Enterprise episode that we saw, is interesting because, all of Shakespeare's canon to varying degrees is preserved forever in amber, if not academically, then also, on the stage. But you can take, say, a story about a father who is protecting his daughter, and people come from the outside world, and maybe he's a hologram or he's got powers or something like that, and people might have to be reminded, and that's the Tempest, or like you've got a character who's very ambitious, and he's got a wife who's even more ambitious, and you're like, well, that's kind of like Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. But maybe it's because Hamlet is still so present in the minds of audiences. You don't often see a Hamlet. You don't often see somebody just saying, we've literally got a situation where a guy's brother kills him, and then the son has to avenge him, and the mother's like involved. Like, other than just like having brothers, fathers, and mothers and stuff like that in a movie, like you don't often see that. The best example I can think of is Strange Brew.
Oh, yeah, I've never seen it, actually.
The Bob and Doug McKenzie movie.
Yeah. I know all the little lines and references, but I've never actually watched that movie.
Oh, you should. It's really funny.
Is it an adaptation of Hamlet?
Yeah. It's there's Elsinore Brewery is the setting of it. Yeah,
that's
and
great.
A character dies, and Max von Sydow, classic actor himself, is the villain, and yeah.
All right, yeah, I'm gonna have to go back to that. It's similar. It's the same thing, I guess. With you don't really see it with Romeo and Juliet. You only just see like, I feel like you just see like, anytime people do it, it's like we're just doing Romeo and Juliet, or because it is very specific, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I think it's the more general idea of like a teenage romance that goes wrong. I think that you could say it's Romeo
I guess
and Juliet,
that is
like,
more common.
but unless you're literally doing West Side Story, nobody's going to accuse you of doing Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, true. It's so pervasive. Whereas, I feel like Hamlet is such a specific thing. But I think the thing that seems universal about it to me, I guess the aspect I liked about this, and I assume Hamlet itself, is that these are very like. You mentioned Succession. It's like most of these people, like none of these people are like good people, but like with every character, there's something you kind of can relate to, or like they're pitiable in some ways. And that's like one of my favorite kind of like stories, is like where there's no one that's really like, I hate when people complain about like character, like a movie having characters or something, no characters that are likable or whatever. It's like, I love that stuff.
I do too. And at the same time, I think that most adaptations that I've seen, be they stage or theatrical or television adaptations, they don't play into the kind of themes or problematic traits that I think that other media really is. It's like when you do Hamlet, you want Hamlet to be the conflicted good guy. You want the bad guys to be bad guys. But I do think it is more ambiguous. And also when you remember that Hamlet is a prince. He is completely privileged in this case. He, there are different schools of argument. Some people, think he's like, 18. Some people think that he's like a 35-year-old kid who's like, hey, move out of the basement already. And he's privileged to the point where he's got a bunch of people that do things for him. At the end of the play, he's literally like killed a guy's father, and the guy just wants some answer for that. And then he's like, at a fencing match, he's like, we're good though, right? Are we good? And he expects that like that Laertes will accept that. And I think that shows arrogance on the part of Hamlet, but people never want to explore the arrogance of Hamlet. And I think that's why somebody should do, a modern update where this is a character who is, a character of privilege, of the 1%, a fail son, like a corporate fail son. Let's have somebody like go full hog on something like that, and really look at this character and see if we can identify with him in his grief, in his desire for revenge and retribution, but also like play up the parts of him that you wouldn't like. I mean, do you really want this guy to be wearing his muscle t-shirt and just laying around all day and complaining about how sad he is? It's like, get over it.
Yeah, like with the muscle tee is a good. That's when like that, and then like the way he was interacting around that play, I was like, okay, I totally get this.
He's not
like,
very
character.
nice to women, you know. He's kind of like, I know that he's supposed to be quote unquote crazy, but a lot of the things that he said, a lot of the things you say when you're drunk are like who you really are, right? And he's like calling his mother a whore, and he's calling his girlfriend a whore, and he's just yelling at everybody. He's disrespectful to old people, and so yeah, like I know he's supposed to be like theater's greatest hero, but let's look honestly at some of these bad traits.
That really worked when he was like filming the play, but filming his parents.
Yeah.
And
with his little Super 8 camera. Yeah.
Like how they make that line of when he, you know, that famous line of when he asks his mom what she thinks of the play. Like it stands out even more as like, what a shithead that he's like filming her reaction. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yes. And Gertrude, the role of Gertrude, played by Penny Downey in this, is a tough role because I think it's very thankless. You know, the most famous, you know, English play of all time, with a lot of good roles for the men. Nobody's too unhappy about what they get to do. Pretty good role for Ophelia, pretty good scene, and then Gertrude like doesn't really get to do much. And like I think the best Gertrudes find the subtext to play, you know, without the Yoda-like lines of the bard to speak. They find ways to show us that there's more going on, and I think that that Downey does a great job showing how much she's kind of losing it over what's going on. And when Hamlet confronts her and kills Polonius, and she's like, "Okay, great," but she's like, "Oh, this is really bad." Until by the end, and this is something that other productions have sort of done, but by the end, you know, when she drinks the poison, like she knows it's poison. She's like, "Look, I need a way out of this. I'm kind of done with all this."
Yeah, like she's pitiable, but you also are like, yeah, you kind of went along with. Yeah, it works for most of the characters that it's like they have something that's like you feel sorry for them a little bit.
Yeah. Everyone is kind of pitiable, but then everybody's a kind of a jerk and an asshole too.
His buddy is cool.
Yeah,
he sticks by him to the end. I'm like, all right, this is the hero of the story.
That's true. Every hero needs that other guy that's going to show up and just like, yeah, drive you to the airport, whatever you need.
Right? Yeah, that's totally like, yeah, that's something that informed his character for me too, because it seemed like that guy, Horatio, is that his name? Right?
That's right.
Yeah, he was like. He's in this, at least he came off as like very loyal to him, but not it didn't seem like there was any ulterior motive, you know what I mean? He seemed genuinely loyal to him, and that also sympathized Hamlet even more, because you were like, okay, well, you know, there must have been a time in his life, because we only see him in this like manic unraveling state, you know. There must have been a time in his life where he was a pleasure to be around for this guy who seems cool, you know, and he's given him reason to be loyal to him. I don't, you know, we don't really see much of that, but it does connect to you a little bit more. It's like, well, if this guy likes him, he's gotta be cool.
He's so, and then maybe it's just something about Horatio, because, you know, at the end, as Hamlet's dying, Horatio's like, you know, I'm more of an antique Roman, you know, and I'd rather kill myself, you know, to leave life with you than stick around. And Hamlet's like, no, wait. I killed a bunch of people. You need to tell everybody what happened. You need to stick around. So live on with your pain still to serve me. And he does that as well.
Oh, he loves him.
He's the best. Sure. Yeah. Horatio is best boy.
So, yeah, but then when everyone shows up, it's going to be like, Horatio, what happened here? You're going to jail.
Yeah.
You killed all these people.
Yeah. That's actually what the text of which I would recommend if people can get their hands on a copy of Fortin Brass to read it, because Horatio's kind of the other main character, and so he's the guy who, as Fortin Brass starts, he's told everybody what happened, but nothing's really changed, because Fortin Brass has now, you know, the Prince of Norway or whatever has moved in and is taken over Elsinore, and so Horatio's trying to get everybody to, like, you know, to honor what Hamlet did and what happened, and nobody's really listening to Horatio, so he becomes almost a Hamlet-like figure himself.
Yeah, I wouldn't listen to what Hamlet said either. I'd be like, all right, man, like whatever you say.
I know this guy's dancing around. He's not wearing shoes. Do we want to listen to this guy? Come on.
The no shoes. That was the trifecta. Like,
oh yeah, when an actor gets to not wear shoes. Oh boy.
No shoes, the muscle shirt, filming the play and his family. I was like, oh, this guy.
Yeah, he had a lot of fun with that. There are a lot of questions, or maybe some core questions, that kind of get asked about Hamlet, both by scholars, by directors and actors who want to interpret the story, or just by people who are reading it and have been reading it over the years. And those are questions like, what is the deal with the ghost? You know, is the ghost real? Is this a real thing? Are ghosts real in this? Does Hamlet actually go mad? You know, does he really lose his mind at some point? Does Claudius really feel bad for what he did? Because it's pretty unambiguous as to what he did, but like, what were the circumstances sort of behind that? And, you know, finding like the motivation for these characters and the big questions of the play. Would it be right for Hamlet to take revenge? Has that theme and the way that we approach it as an audience changed over the years? Perhaps Elizabethans would think, obviously, you kill the guy and you wait for the bailiff to show up because that's what he deserved. But now we go, you know, he's going to take a life for a life, an eye for an eye. Like, is that the right thing? Like all of these questions kind of swirl around every production of Hamlet. And I think that this isn't a criticism necessarily, but I think that this production specifically kind of plays them all fairly straight, kind of down the line. There are no real hot takes, I don't think, in the way that this version is presented.
No, but I think, I agree with you. And I think tying to what I said earlier about like no characters who are like really that likable. Like that's something I actually kind of liked about it, is that it doesn't like give you an answer, you know. It's just sort of like, it's very matter of fact, you know, like this character did this, and you see their personal feelings about it, you know, I think there's even you feel something when Patrick Stewart's giving his little monologue to himself about doing it, where it's like, okay, like this weighs heavily on him for sure. That's something I liked, that it wasn't so much like, you know, Hamlet good, Hamlet bad, revenge good or bad, you know. It just kind of was like thinking about it.
Yeah. I think that Patrick Stewart, who is always good, but he is fantastic in this. And I think that he knew as a performer that there'd be no point in him trying to shout David Tennant. You know, David Tennant is going to David Tennant. And since I'm the opposite pole of this, I'm the antagonist of this, he does something that I love it when Patrick Stewart does, which is he can be like one of the most believable guys on stage or in a show or in a film. It's fine for Patrick Stewart, for David Tennant to do cartwheels and to, you know, make faces and stuff like that. And that's expected of him. But Patrick Stewart, you know, giving his lines, like you just really believe that he believes what he's saying, you know, and he's not like aggrandizing his speeches or anything like that. He's just being very honest about them. It's funny that not only is this, you know, one of the most famous plays and one of the most loved plays and most acted plays, but it also contains within it a commentary on how to do plays. when the players show up to do the play within the play, Hamlet gives a speech that is the same criticisms that I just leveled, which is too often actors just go blah, blah. They're doing funny voices and they're doing blah, blah, this and that. And it's like, don't do that, you know, suit the action to the speech, you know, the speech to the action. And I got to tell you, actors love it when a shoeless asshole tells them how to do their job. But
that's right. That was when I was like, oh, this guy, like, he's just like this spoiled rich kid who thinks he knows everything about.
Do this one. How's it go? La-di-da. I guess I'll do it. Is it like this? Yeah. What a prick.
I was like, shut up, man.
Yeah. But I love that sets up the idea that he makes the guy do the speech, and everybody loves the speech, and he's like, man, he was so good. And then he realizes like, oh, the speeches like this bring out emotions in people. I'll have them do a play that will obviously make Claudius react. That's where we get the play is the thing from. Like it will prick his conscience so that he responds, and then I'll know, because I don't want to just murder somebody and not know if I'm murdering the right person. So I'm going to have them do this. So you've got that side of the coin. The other side of the coin is one of my favorite speeches or sort of sections in the play, where he talks about the player king giving the speech and being affected and crying. And he's like, I'm so locked up inside. My father's dead. My uncle killed him, and I can't do anything. And this guy who just learned a speech is like bawling. What's Hecuba to him or he to Hecuba? He can feel these emotions. Of course, I guess Hamlet doesn't know how acting works. Like, it is a performance. It's not real. But he's mad at himself that this guy can make himself feel these things and cry, and Hamlet is still just sitting here with his dick in his hand. And so that's the crisis that motivates, everything that takes place afterwards, from putting the play on to Claudius realizing, shit, this kid's on to me. We have to like change things up here, to him killing Polonius, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's just like a great, that's the top of the roller coaster, and then the cars go down the slope after that. Yeah.
You just made me think too about how, like, we were talking about how where it lands on the themes. I think one thing that works in the story too is you think, like, in his mind, it's like, they're going to perform the scene and they're going to emotionally react, and that will prove their guilt. But like, they do it, and it, like, people are kind of enjoying it. He's making it awkward by filming them, but then he starts like blatantly shouting the themes at them.
Yeah.
And like, that makes a scene, and they're like, okay, we got to wrap it up. But to him, it's like, that proves it. But it's like, no, you like forced this outcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it did not prove what you were trying to prove, even though it's true. It didn't, like, you literally just willed that to exist,
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to look for the WMDs.
Right. Yeah. So it was like,
he's got them.
Even he's like, this play will say this to these people. And he's like, no, do you get it? Do you get what it's about?
Yes. Yeah. He poured some poison in his ear, it's an interesting thing. And like, again, I think that it's just kind of a criticism I have of a lot of like modern Hamlets, is that like, I think that he is always, because he's like sexy and cool and it's the coolest role an actor can ever play, it's rarely ever played to the point of distraction. Because you're right, Hamlet is fucking up his own plan here, and he's doing it because he's impatient and he's distraught and he wants the resolution that he wants, and so he's literally, all he has to do is just let them do the thing that he said that they needed to do. And yet he's getting up on stage and he's like, I want to make sure everybody got this. And he's he's tripping on his own dick.
Because like, that is like very obviously then how they're like, okay, he's definitely onto us.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Also, yeah, it isn't like Claudius is just like, geez, I hope nobody saw that. Like, Claudius is like, what is this fucker doing? Yeah. Yeah, it's some good stuff. It's the kind of thing that you can talk around. You can interpret it in different ways, and it still usually works. I'll just bring up here because we talked about Kenneth Branagh's Henry V previously on the show. I think that Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet was kind of a reaction to his Henry V, because his Henry V is a very good film, in my opinion. And it is like 90 minutes long. Like, it's pared down to be, just an exciting story. And that probably disappointed him. So by the time he got to make, in 1996, Hamlet, he's like, we're doing every single line of text. We're doing all 4 hours of the film. And as Kenneth Branagh, the avatar of Western theater in the 20th century, I know that everybody has their own take on Hamlet, and there's a way that they expect all these characters to be played. So what I'm going to do is do the opposite for every single one of these things. And so he's got like Polonius, who, and I think that you can interpret characters all kinds of different ways. Like, when I played Polonius, I was way too young, obviously, to play Polonius, but I played him as like a young, like, single dad, kind of like
father who stepped up.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, wife died when the kids were young, and so he's like, hey, I'm the cool dad. You can tell me about your boyfriend. Are you guys having sex? Like, I tried to play it like that. Although he's generally seen as like the old bumbling fool. In the Branagh version, he's like this scheming, like he's not a dummy. Like he's like, all of his plots are like, we're going to do this, and ooh, I'm evil, and give me the letters so we can do this. And that's there, but it's not like, we're supposed to feel bad for Polonius when he gets stabbed. Like Hamlet did a bad thing. But
yeah.
I think it is possible to push your interpretation of things, or at least your desire to like shake it up a little too far. And I don't think, like I said before, I don't think that this does this. I think that this is like a pretty standard down the middle interpretation of the show.
Yeah, it seems like it. I am curious about the Branagh one, just because even if I don't like it, I do.
Well, set aside 5 nights someday and watch an act a night.
Well, no, this is one that I would be willing to sit down and watch the whole thing because, like,
yeah. I want to talk to you right after you finish it.
Because, well. No, I don't even want to make the comparison, but I do like, even if they don't end up being good all the time, I do like watching these like really self-indulgent kind of over long things like that. I think it's fun, but even if it doesn't work out, I love that stuff.
Yeah, well, let me know how that goes.
One day, maybe.
There's Richard the Third is another Shakespeare play, and Ian McKellen was in a filmed version of Richard the Third in the 90s when they were making all these, or most of these Shakespeare pop adaptations. Mm-hmm. And they did, for that, they did kind of it was kind of like part Nazi Germany, but part like British fascism as well. And so Richard the Third was compared to sort of like a Hitler-esque kind of figure, and they were all wearing, like SS uniform type things. And so that'd be an example of like, oh, wow, okay, you went for it here.
You really did a spin on this one.
Yeah, somebody got the green light to just go for it.
Wow. Okay.
But other than Forbidden Planet, like I can't, and then that episode of Enterprise that we saw, like I can't think of a lot of like space Shakespeare stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure it's gotta exist, right? Like, well, even
I guess it must. I guess I should know.
They bring it up a lot in that we did that one episode with Henry V or whatever, and they bring it up a lot in that episode of Star Trek, but it's not really the whole thematic thing of the episode. It's just kind of like a reference they like to bring up a lot.
Well, Star Trek is, I've heard people call Star Trek space opera, and people get mad about that. And I don't really know how I feel, but I think generally we don't think of Star Trek as being classic space opera. In classic space opera, you can have the king of a planet, his son and daughter, Luke and Leia, and that sort of thing. That's like a fantasy setting, and Star Trek doesn't cleave to that. But there's so much politic and like civics in some Shakespeare plays that you think that they would map well onto the planet of England and the planet of France or something like that.
Star Trek is not space opera, but it just in like tone, often it's like space play. It's often very stagey. They have these like kind of stagey sets a lot, and
also just the structure of a 5-act TV show. Yeah,
and the actors they get are people who do that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Mr. Patrick Stewart himself. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of big speeches, big Picard speeches. I always feel like that's the very staged element of it, and it gets goofy sometimes. I mean, some of that is just like, it's like a sci-fi show. Like those are often kind of budget cheesy, but it often reminds me of sometimes seeing a goofy play or something, like watching the play that is in this movie or something, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever see Battle Beyond the Stars?
No, I've never seen it.
It is a Roger Corman ripoff of Star Wars, but it is essentially just the Magnificent Seven, the plot of the Magnificent Seven, which is itself, of course, the plot of the Seven Samurai. And so you have this Luke Skywalker-esque character played by Richard Thomas who has to go out and collect a ragtag band of like space, pilots and fighters to protect his planet against, the evil empire. And again, that's samurai movie / Western. Like sci-fi is lousy with Western adaptations, but yeah, where are the like the Shakespeare adaptations?
Yeah, it seems like it should be really fitting to do.
Yeah,
doesn't seem hard. Just throwing a monster or something, or some lasers.
Sure. Maybe there's not enough of a plot or enough action, because I was thinking about what sets Shakespeare, and specifically Hamlet, apart from both his peers and just kind of dry classical theater. And that is like the emotions and the interactions of the characters. Some plays are just, this thing happens and we're going to attack the castle, and that worked or it didn't. And the king is going to he decrees that you have to leave. And Hamlet is, it's not exactly like a psychological thriller, but it really is content to have a character just sit there and describe how sad he is and how he really is skeeved out by the fact that his mom is dating his uncle now, and then learn that, maybe his uncle killed his mom, and then talk about how he doesn't think that he can do anything about that, but he should be angry about it, and how maybe he should kill himself, if he's so sad. And instead of just, people fighting or people moving things from point A to point B, like it's really just sitting kind of in that and talking about what the nature of, thought and life and time is. And I just think that's really interesting. I can't imagine, this must have failed, right? When it first came out, like there's no way that the general audiences would have liked this. They'd just be waiting for the sword fight at the end.
Yeah. Which they don't start hyping up till later.
Yeah.
So
till very much later. Yeah.
I think what you described, and you mentioned earlier too, like this idea of is the ghost real, that sort of thing, is maybe this doesn't work as much as sci-fi, but I think you described like this is kind of like how a lot of horror movies are, like supernatural horror, where it's like I think of like Hereditary, I guess, where like part of it is like everyone else views like what the character is going through as like maybe they're having mental health issues or something like that, and like everyone questioning them. I guess that's kind of more what Hamlet is like, there's this ghost in every well, I guess actually like other people see it though, right? Or like Horatio and them see it.
So at the beginning, Horatio shows up because he's, somebody said, hey, there's this weird thing happening here. And then Hamlet, talks to it. But then later in the play, and this has been debated for 400 years, but, he goes to confront his mother, and it seems like he's getting angry and violent with her, and the ghost shows up, but she can't see it. Only he can see it. Mm-hmm. And she can only see that he is very distracted, and very... kind of at his wit's end and freaking out. And so we don't know if this is just a selective appearance by the ghost, because the ghost does not return again. He doesn't come in threes. He only shows up twice, so, or I guess he shows up once without Hamlet and then shows up for Hamlet, but he doesn't like give a thumbs up at the end. There's no blue force ghost of Hamlet's father that joins Hamlet and Yoda at the end.
It'd be great if he showed up to Horatio at the end and he's like, yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted.
Yeah, no, it all worked out.
Good enough.
Don't even worry about it. You can have all my stuff. Yeah. Boy, the dumb show, the play that they put on in the middle was really weird. And were they speaking in Simlish? Like they all decided to like do this like sort of nonsense talk where they're like blah 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 blah.
Is that what happens? I don't know.
That's not in the text.
Okay, what does it just say? Like they put on a weird show or something?
Well, back in the day, sometimes they would do spoilers, I guess, for the play, but they would do what's called a dumb show, which is where the actors or other actors would sort of act out without talking very quickly, like what's going to happen. It's kind of like, here's the summary of what you're about to see. Then the actors come out and do the long-winded speeches and talk and talk and talk and talk. But like it's the sort of the short Reader's Digest version of what you're about to see.
Similar to how I was like, I read the plot synopsis of Hamlet before watching this because I was like, what if I don't know what they're saying?
Yeah. Right.
And for me, the dummy watching the play.
They do that, but they're like, but what if we're just like, we spent all this time making the players seem amazing, and then they come out and they're like, ee-er. You're like, okay.
Yeah, though when they did like the real
trippingly
part
on the
of
tongue. Simlish trippingly on the tongue. Yeah.
Right. The real part of it was pretty good though.
Yeah.
Like the actual like dialogue and stuff when they got to that part, I was like, oh, this is cool. This play within a play.
Yeah. It's pretty good. Play within a play.
That would be in my video game. That would be there, like in a lot of the Final Fantasy games. They put a play in a play.
Yeah, they do. That's right.
I would do that where you have to actually act in the play. And
what's behind that? I wonder. That's weird.
What's behind it in Final Fantasy?
You know, they have that in The Witcher as well.
And I think it was really popular in Final Fantasy VI, and they're like, well, you got to keep doing it.
If you're writing, maybe if you're just writing a computer RPG, there's a bucket of slips that you can pull from. Oh man, we need another 20 hours on this thing. So it's like a thing where the character has to awkwardly recite the lines in the play.
Yeah, it's probably a good go-to. Or I think of like in like the most recent Hitman game, they had a part where you act out like a actual train murder mystery or something.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And it's like you can actually get to the target you're trying to take out by just playing along and doing it.
That's wow. Well, that doesn't count though, because like 47's good at everything. You know, he's just a jack of all trades. So
yeah, he's like, all right, I'll solve this mystery. Yeah.
Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with the candlestick. Yeah.
It's probably just easy because it's all text based, you know. So
yeah.
But also, yeah, I think it was so huge in that one game in 6 or whatever that it's like, well, that's a staple now.
Well, now I want to go and just conceptualize and work on this game, this epic game that we're going to make.
We got a game. We got a movie.
What's the Hamlet of video games?
The Hamlet of video games. Probably Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, jeez. That's like the Oedipus Rex of video games.
Oh, okay. Is there a video game where they're like, should I kill myself? Like that's...
Huh.
Heavy Rain. I don't know.
Oh my God.
I'm kidding.
Don't let David Cage hear that.
Yeah. No, he would love that.
Well, you know, okay, you know what? So I am mostly a PlayStation kid, not a Xbox kid, although I have owned Xboxes at times in my lives. So when I think about this question, I say, you know, is it Final Fantasy VII or is it Metal Gear Solid? And
Ooh.
I think Final Fantasy VII does have themes. I don't think the character wants to kill himself, but the character does question his existence and his identity and why he's alive. And slight setting spoilers for the Metal Gear Solid series, but the character is also near the end of the series contemplating his existence and whether to continue it. So yeah, maybe there is one. Maybe there's more than one. Take that, literature.
Yeah, that's when they perfected it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they really refined it at that point.
Yeah, one of those would work for me. I would agree with one of those. One of them is let's say one's the Romeo and Juliet or whatever. Or maybe that's Super Mario 64. I don't know.
Yeah, or a dating sim, how to have a boyfriend or something like that.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely figure out how that works out in the end too. The comparisons.
Okay, that's the next project to work on.
Back playing. I don't know.
Back playing. All right, we're giving away too much here. You gotta leave a little.
Yeah.
a little under the kimono still. All right. Well, I think that we have done our duty here. We've held the mirror up to nature. So with that, let's take a break for a word from our sponsors. We'll be back with more backtrekking.
Okay, Caliban, are you prepared to take your Sailor Noob graduation quiz?
Mikan Hana, I'm so prepared for this. I learned fluent Japanese.
Impressive.
Arigato gozaimasu.
First question. The hero of Sailor Moon is Usagi Tsukino. What does Usagi mean in Japanese?
Rabbit.
Correct.
Yes.
Next question. As Sailor Moon, Usagi and the Sailor Scouts live and go to school in what Tokyo neighborhood?
Easy. Azubu Juban.
That's right. One more correct answer and you'll no longer be a Sailor Noob. The human form of the Cardian Leshy is tasked by Aelin Ann to gather life energy. What Japanese historical period are Leshy's human forms closed from?
What?
I'm sorry, the answer was the Heian period.
Bakana!
Better luck next time. But for all the answers, listen to Sailor Noob, where we discuss the food, fashion, and culture of Sailor Moon, wherever you get your podcasts.
Watashi wa hazukashi. Okay, we're back, and it's time to talk about the Trek side of this equation. Because Shakespeare is such a pillar of the Western tradition of the dramatic arts, it wouldn't be too shocking to see an allusion to the works of the Bard in anything from a political thriller to even the broadest workplace comedy. Sending Shakespeare to space, however, might seem like vaulting ambition. After all, how can you deliver all those soliloquies without any oxygen? The truth is, Shakespeare has been all over the Trek canon since its earliest inception. The epic storytelling of Shakespeare's plays, the florid dialogue, and the human pathos of his work is well suited to the exploits of the star-crossed men and women who explore strange and brave new worlds in Starfleet. Sometimes it's a titular allusion like Dagger of the Mind or All Our Yesterdays, and sometimes it's Christopher Plummer getting his Star Trek VI script mixed up with his complete works. But throughout its 55-year history, Star Trek has ever aspired to match the power and significance of Shakespeare's work, and to express that our fault lies not in the stars, but in ourselves, and the worlds that we seek to discover, as well as the worlds that we seek to leave behind. So it is in the first season original series episode, The Conscience of the King.
Captain's log, stardate 2817.2. Suspicion that a famous actor is in reality Kodos, the mass executioner, places the Enterprise and her crew in grave danger. Riley, get back to the sickbay. Kodos is dead. I'm satisfied with that.
Well, I'm not. That voice, a bloody thing he did.
Raleigh's gone. I was recording my log about Caridian and Kodos. If he overheard...
You've made your point, Doctor. You were very impressive as Lady Macbeth.
And is Lenore Caridian?
Very impressive.
Almost certainly an attempt will be made to kill you. Why do you invite death?
There's a phaser on overload in my quarters. If it blows, it'll take out the entire deck.
You know, we have talked about Shakespeare a lot, I guess. I just think that talking about Hamlet means that you're talking about Shakespeare itself, you know, the very heart, and not a specific...
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Not a specific play. And I was thinking, you know, just last week, speaking of Shakespeare allusions, what's the last line of the Maltese Falcon? It's the stuff that dreams are made of, you know, a reference to The Tempest.
Yeah, I think there's other things, too, we've covered that reference it, reference Shakespeare that is coincidental, you know. It's kind of in the DNA of a lot of stories, obviously.
Other than the fact that you couldn't have a main character who wanted to be captain really bad and killed somebody, they should do a Macbeth in Star Trek. And maybe you could. People seem to like these mirror universe tales. Why not do a mirror universe Macbeth?
That's perfect, yeah.
Yeah. Where a guy gets a promotion, he gets promoted to XO, but then his... maybe we can update it from life, you know. But anyway, somebody with a little more agency than Lady Macbeth.
Alex Kurtzman right
now.
Oh
my God. No, delete it. But he wants more. And so he kills his captain, and then he ends up under investigation. And yeah, that's my idea.
Trademark. We're mailing the podcast to ourselves again.
We have mailed this one to ourselves one more time. This is it changes, but this is one of, if not my favorite episodes.
Oh yeah, it's great.
And it's an opinion that I share with Ronald D. Moore, who has talked at length about the fact that he likes this and why he likes it. Chief among the reasons being, the sweeping themes, the dialogue. So much so that in Battlestar Galactica, they named a ship the Astral Queen, after the ship that we hear about in the beginning of this episode. That's the kind of illusion that you can do that isn't like, oh yes, we're going over to the Enterprise to fight the Cylons. Like, it doesn't really work. But like if you take like the Astral Queen,
no, that fits, yeah.
Or if you name your Simpsons character Kodos, you can do that.
Yeah,
too.
I noticed. Well, I've noticed that before for sure.
Yeah.
That's actually, that brings me to like what I think is great about. Well, we talked about how like Star Trek, it can be a little like, hammy at times, and that's something that I think really works about this episode is that it takes these very, it's like got this very kind of serious reference point, or something we think of as very serious, so like Shakespeare. It's like everyone takes that seriously for the most part. And they treat this story too with a lot of seriousness, and like I love it. I think it's great. But it opens up with a guy going, "That's him. That's Kodos, the executioner."
Yes, right.
And I'm like, I love this. Like right away, I was like,
he says out of half of his face. Yeah.
Yes, it is immediately like, this is one of the best openings to any Star Trek episode. It's just, it's got such a good tone.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And one of the things that I like about that opening is the fact that they open, in medias res on this play. Like no other Star Trek episode opens like this, and you kind of wonder, like, do I got the right channel? Like, what is this? But it shows that they're really committed to this conceit, not just to have their the characters and the action center around play and a troupe of players, but also to really do an episode of Star Trek kind of like a Shakespeare play, So it opens up, and we are watching this character who is playing. It's funny that, like, you think Caridian would just do like Neil Simon plays or something like that, but he's specifically chosen to play roles about characters that are racked with guilt, Macbeth, and the Hamlet characters and things like that. But he's playing that, and so we're following that. We have, not a ghost necessarily, but a guy with half a face come to Kirk and say, "There's this problem, and you got to take care of it," and then have Kirk be putting his own command in jeopardy, acting in ways that make his second Spock suspicious. Spock goes to McCoy, and they have a conspiratorial scene where McCoy is just openly drinking, like, Falstaff, or like a sort of a rude Shakespeare character, and Spock is sneaking around, and Kirk is then confronting Kodos, and then you have this, and it all ends backstage on a Shakespeare play set. It's just like, it's fantastic. Yeah.
I thought, because I had seen this many times, but it had been a while, and I thought going into it like, oh, this is just in name, it's going to have some references, but really it was like, it was thematically, if not like the exact same as Hamlet, it fits alongside that and what it's going for and its tone, and having, like you said, the character who is racked with guilt be the guy. And I think for him, that's like, it's like confessional almost, you know what I mean?
I guess do some Oscar Wilde or something. Like, why? I guess it's like, that's how an actor punishes himself.
Yeah, I think that's like, what he's doing. Yeah. I think
my art therapy. Yeah.
I think it's like, he can confess it, but it's like safe to do so.
I suppose. I also like the fact that it opens, like we said, during the middle of a play, and it's a definitive statement by the show that Shakespeare will still exist in the future. To put another 300, 400 years on it, they'll still be. They don't have TVs, and they talk about how they don't have TVs.
They don't have TVs,
but they still watch plays and they watch Shakespeare, and so I think that's an important statement that the show is trying to make about its world.
Yeah, I feel like they might still watch like Mad Men or The Sopranos or something, right?
Yeah. This plays fine, but replicate me some more Wire DVDs.
I want the serious Frasier episode where someone like Kodos, the executioner, is now just replaying episodes of Frasier.
He just as punishment.
Yeah.
Oh, Dr. Crane, would that you could listen to me. Yeah.
Wow.
So they really go for it in this, to the point where I've always said that, like, what do I say? I don't remember what I say. It's about Marvel movies, right? I have two Marvel movies that are kind of like my favorite Marvel movies. And like one of them is Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, although I'm willing to revisit that. And the other is Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
Okay.
And I think, and I go back and forth as to which one is better, mostly because I think that Guardians of the Galaxy is like the perfect Marvel movie meets a space adventure movie. You know, you've got a hero. He's a guy who needs to grow up. I think that's an important lesson for a lot of Marvel fans. And
sure.
And he collects a team of people. He changes them. They all learn that family is important. And it's just like the structure is like perfect. And it's funny and it's got great action. Whereas The Winter Soldier is a movie that you can't really enjoy unless you have seen previous Captain America movies, if you understand, you know, what a 70s, political thriller is. And it takes what's already been established in the universe and changes it in such an important way and sends it in a new direction. And also so perfectly apes the feeling of, like, what if Robert Redford had a metal arm? That it's just this perfect synthesis of previous material and it's also just a real cracking, like, action movie to boot. And
definitely, yeah.
And so my original point was, I do love this episode. It might be my favorite, but I'm not sure that it's a good Star Trek episode.
Okay.
And in its original, thank you. In its original run, it was like one of the lowest rated episodes of the first season, to the point where when they were rerunning them in the summer, they didn't rerun this one because they were like, people hated this. Why would we do that? And things are always misunderstood in their time, but I do think it is very talky, and the characters are they are speaking differently. I don't know. It's not quite Yoda. It's not quite like iambic pentameter, but they are talking different than they usually do. You know,
Definitely.
when a character says to Kirk, you know, that there's a stain on your shining armor and that sort of thing. Like, the dialogue is different than a typical Trek episode. But if you can take Trek, if Trek can be a setting and a place in it on its own, this is like the perfect. I don't think there's been a better version of a play in Star Trek.
Yeah, no, and I mean, something that I like about it is that it's kind of unique. Because even like I'm at a point in like, I'm watching through Deep Space Nine, and I just watched one episode. I don't want to spoil it, but Worf has to take some people on a trip to get someone into Stovacor. And it's just a very much like, it's about like him being like, yes, I want to accept all these other people who cared about this person to go like murder all these guys, you know? And it's like heroic. But then like a few, like in the same season, we covered that one episode, the Siege of AR or whatever. And it's very much like, you know, war is horrible, violence is scary and terrible, and we're talking about the same war here, you know what I mean? It's like totally different tones, and the way characters talk about it are different, and it's like, but it still fits together, and it's still like they're telling the same story, but they are like, we're telling this story here through this type of movie or this type of story and this type of story. And I guess that's what I like about this, is like, it is radically different, but especially at the original series, I feel like it has the most free reign to be like, and this week it's, you know, a Western or whatever.
Yeah. And you know, it's both the fact that it's been around for 55 years. You're going to have to do that at some point, because you're just going to run out of like space stories to tell. But also I think it's a tribute to the versatility of the entire franchise, that you can do that. I mean, we wouldn't have a podcast if you couldn't do that.
I guess that's our premise. Yeah. But
yeah, that is kind of our premise. We did it. We hit bedrock, everybody. Time to start heading the other way.
You do have characters kind of like going slightly different than you normally expect them. But I think some of the characters are, they're like Batman or James Bond, where you can put them in different settings and like, you know, do this type of story with them, and they can kind of mold to fit it without like totally misrepresenting the character. You know what I mean? Like Spock and McCoy they're not Spock and McCoy in this, I don't think.
No, they're not. But they are different though. Yeah.
They're definitely a little strange for sure.
It's almost like they're playing themselves, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I would agree with you on Batman. I disagree on James Bond. I think that, and they've tried very hard in the most recent film, but I think that Bond is essentially what he is, and he can be the Overton window on Bond can be slid in one direction or another, but I think that they are going to have their hands full making a new Bond post the Craig era.
Yeah, I guess it's in like a smaller window, but like there's like a range of Bond of like he's like a spy with a heart of gold, or he's like a complete psychopath.
He's just a murderer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I guess there's the two switches.
And it's Sean Connery and Roger Moore. They accomplished it in the first 10 years of the franchise. Yeah.
They haven't found a new lane totally, but except like you're old, man.
Yeah, right. He's always old. Starfleet officers and James Bond are always too old for this.
Yeah.
I didn't think that we would get here, and this isn't necessarily what we're supposed to be talking about, but I did want to talk about what you brought up about Klingons and telling a story about how war is awesome, and then, having in DS9 a story about how war is hell. And someday we're going to do that Red Badge of Courage episode, so watch out for that.
Yeah.
But I'm all for... we just got done talking about putting Hamlet in space. I'm all for recontextualizing anything to do whatever. But I feel like there is the way that the Klingons have always been portrayed is this very there's got to be a better, I keep using this over and over again, but like this very sort of toxic culture, where strength is praised and weakness and mercy are not. And you think that like the thing that you would want to do if you want to take on that idea is do a story about a Klingon who isn't like that, or to really challenge that. And like, I think that's all well and good, but in our established world of Star Trek, you don't want to toy with other species or races too much, because you want them to remain essentially what they are. And also, I think that you want to avoid flattening all other cultures so that they're all the Federation. There's something that Star Trek doesn't really address, which is, the Federation is a collection of all these species. It is, having all these different cultures being themselves and not being the same, not being completely homogenized and hegemonized, but also sharing enough of each other's values that they have the same goals. And you want to keep that and not turn it into the Federation as a food court where there's a Panda Express over here. Do you know what I mean? And
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
And a Noodles and Company over there. So like you could totally do a story that attacks like toxic masculinity in a Klingon setting, but I would rather see take the Klingons' values as a given. I think the best Klingon stories take their values as a given and then challenge them. And that's why Worf, I think, is such a great character, because he is a character who values and understands like those things, but he has also seen people be kind to each other. He's been kind to people himself, and he's seen the logic in retreating, or the logic of having a plan and not just running in, with your bat lift held high.
I agree.
And so he's a great bridge between those two worlds. And I was thinking about the soldiers in the episode AR-558 and how it's more about how war is hell. They're not really getting into this, but all those soldiers are like, I'm killing lots of Jem'Hadar.
Ketracel,
all those
tubes and...
Yeah, right. He had the ear necklace and everything. And it's like, that's a good like look into like, okay, these people are not used to this, and they have been pushed way too far by like what's going on in this war. Like they got to get out of this.
You do have like from the outside, you have Nog being like, that guy's cool,
Yeah, right, exactly. And he idolizes that guy and doesn't realize like what he's signing on for. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you made a good point with Worf. Like he's a good example too of how you do both, like avoid both of those issues, or like how you don't flatten a culture, but you do tell someone who's going against the grain. And like something I like about him too is, this is sort of like headcanon for me, I guess, though it's somewhat acknowledged, is like they did do a whole episode about how Worf isn't really like other Klingons, and they often talk about how like people often say lines about how like, oh, like they're like this because they have like Klingon blood, and they make it almost seem biological, but it's clear that Worf does the things he does is because he wants to feel like he has a connection to his heritage, you know, and he does it so differently than the rest of them do. Yeah. And that's why it like, this is way off topic, but it bothers me that one episode where they split B'Elanna in two and they're like, this is the Klingon side of me. And it's like, that totally throws away like everything that was like interesting about Worf, you know, is that I even think early on, like his first episode in TNG, he's like, oh, I felt the burning in my blood or whatever. But it's like, no, you didn't, man. You read some books about what it means to be Klingon, and you like fantasized about it so bad that it like drove you crazy, you know?
Yeah, and he's a fascinating study, almost a perfect study in, you know, a mixed race character, you know, a person who has, you know, two different heritages that they're reconciling. And you go, aren't you supposed to talk about Spock? And the answer is yes, but in as much as they have succeeded with that type of character without really knowing it, not sure they ever sat down and really knew that they were this, you know, in the great tradition of Star Trek allegory. Like, I don't think they thought like, no, Worf is like a multiracial character. I don't think they thought of it like that. They really didn't think about that with Spock. Like, I like Spock. I like the fact that he does have to make a synergy of his two. All the best lessons in Spock's life, especially when the movies hit, is that he needs to have both things. Like, he wants to be one so bad, but he realizes that, no, look at all that I'm giving up if I'm not friends with Jim,
yes.
You know, and with Bones, I guess, too. Those lessons are there, but it takes until the 70s for them to start coming out, because he's mostly just, him being half Vulcan is just kind of a thing on his character bio. Like, he's just a Vulcan, you know, so at least as far as he's concerned.
Yeah, there are a few references to it or whatever, but overall, he is more... And that's not even really a knock against this character, because he's great.
No.
In the original series, but it is cool in the movies where they're like, we're gonna like examine that more for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so here's a way to smash back into the episode that we're supposed to be talking about. Did you know that the Star Trek theme is a song in the universe of Star Trek that is often played at cocktail parties?
Kind of well, that's great. It would have been better if it like, we're on a Star Trek. It's really fun.
There are words to the theme.
Yeah. It'd have been better if it was more, they look into the camera and...
Yeah, there's a guy. Bill Murray's on stage, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Star Wars. Yeah.
But yeah, they're at a swinging cocktail party, and I like that he comes into like... he's like, hey, where's Tom? And I guess he like ran into town for ice. But like literally ran into town because they find him, you know, laying dead in the rocks later on.
It's a little true crime sometimes. Like this, like we talked about how this could thematically be like, you could easily just make this into like a Shakespearean type, like set it, you know, in the way back times. And it would work if you just took out some of the sci-fi elements, which there's not a lot of, I guess. But, this would also work if you were like, you want to make like a Fincher movie or something, you know?
Sure. Yeah, like have him get hit by a hovercraft, you know, on his blind side. So it's like, what happened? Because we never really find out like what happened to him. But like Lenore just goes out, you know, and hits him with a car, and then it's like plausible that like, oh, he got too close to the road.
Yeah, he can't see.
It's a tragedy. Yeah.
Instead, it's like, no, something is definitely happening here.
You might be able to blow this up into like a feature-length thing, you know, where she's like taking out the 9 people like one by one. Because maybe here at the end, it's a little more desperate. It's like, okay, I got to kill like Half-Face. Then I'm going to like spray some Windex in Riley's milk, and that'll be real suspicious. But he's gone.
That was a line too far for me, actually.
Yeah.
I like everything else. I'm like, I love this. This is great. Actually, no, maybe the Windex is good, but it's like you couldn't come up with a better prop for that just to go with some spray.
Well, I think spray bottles and just plastics in general were futuristic at this time, right? Like, obviously, they would still have this amazing spray technology, yeah.
But they're always like jabbing people with the like little tricorder thing.
That's true.
Why couldn't she just,
drop a pill in or something like that?
Or like a glass vial with a skull and crossbones on it.
Yeah, right.
A spray bottle is something else.
Yeah. What does juice of cursed Hebena look like in the 24th century or the 23rd century?
They wouldn't update it. It would still be a giant cartoonish beaker.
You gotta poison somebody. That's how we do it. It's Shakespeare. Kodos is an interesting character, or I guess I should say Caridian. I think people have pointed out, and we won't belabor it here, but there's another alien who thinks that killing half of the population is a good idea. And he's got a big purple chin.
Yeah.
And I was about to comment on how there's a troubling thing that I think early Star Trek does. And that is that it often talks about, well, first of all, to say, it often talks about the pressures of leadership and command, and how command and the ruling class need to make tough decisions. But it rarely ever sternly judges the characters who make those decisions. And so Khan was a super being who, as far as we know, ran like a quarter of the earth and caused a war that, killed millions or whatever. And then Kirk finds him frozen in space, unfreezes him. Khan tries to kill him, take his ship, and all they do is go, well, it's just a misunderstanding. We're going to leave him on this planet, and who knows? Who knows what could grow from this seed? He's a great man. And this is a story where at least two characters on board this ship were devastated by their connection to this incident where Kodos, killed 50% of a planet's population. But yet he's allowed to make his moral argument, his argument of utilitarianism. And he even kind of wins at the end because he is killed tragically trying to defend Kirk. And so the judgment falls not on the tyrant in this case. It falls on the broken daughter who is trying to protect him. And I don't think that I think modern Trek often gives us tyrants, tin pot leaders, and castigates them in the way that it feels like they deserve. Your Gul Dukats, your other characters like Gul Dukat. Well, yeah. But Star Trek is always showing us these figures and go, this is he's hard to understand. He's hard to understand. He's a complicated man. Yeah. And I don't think that I'm glad that later Trek doesn't put up with that. They're like, no, this guy's full of shit.
Yeah, that's a great Gul Dukat is a great reference point, because it's like they do a lot with him where it's like they do make him seem pathetic at times, where you come close to feeling sorry for him, even though you shouldn't. Yeah,
I don't. but yeah,
I guess you just see his it's not a thing like Thanos where it's like, oh, he was trying to do the right thing, but you at least see I feel some, not pity, I guess, but I see oh, he is haunted by this guilt about this. And he feels bad. That's what's motivating him, and that's what makes him such a great character, I think. As opposed to where it's something like this, where it's well, he was just trying to do the right thing, but it's not easy to do the right thing,
And there are chuds online who are the hashtag Thanos was right, and he's got a good idea
so
there.
Stupid, yeah.
So it hasn't fully gone away, but it just seems like the mainstream is more apt to embrace the idea of no, look, politicians, what they do is tough, and they're going to make bad decisions, but we need to support them. And this kind of bootlicking kind of thing. And
I think a lot.
I feel like at least in popular entertainment, maybe not in the real world, we are getting away from that in the 21st century.
Yeah, I do think a lot of people just feel helpless, and they feel like they don't understand the world, and they think it's too complicated. So it's they're presented with something that's really, it's not that complicated. And it's like, well, who am I to say any better, you know?
What we don't hear is that Kodos had a deal with the food companies on Tarsus 4, and they told him, look, we can't just give this food away for free. It's going to be too expensive to feed everybody. And so you got to do what you got to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That would be like the part of it too.
Yeah.
Where, yeah,
that would be
that's what happens with Ducat, where
what if people can feed themselves and we end up giving them free food? Then they're just stealing food. we don't, they're freeloaders.
Yeah. There does not seem to be, a need for that in Star Trek, I guess. Like, and well, they say so many times we don't have any poverty or blah blah blah. Yeah,
it's interesting though, because this is once again where you get, this is the first season of TOS, and so they don't have everything figured out. And also, I think if you look at TNG in comparison to TOS, they are specifically saying that TOS didn't have everything figured out, because at the very beginning of the episode, Leighton gets Kirk to come because he tells him that they found this food concentrate that could like feed everybody.
Oh, yeah.
So they are not in a total post-scarcity situation. And Kirk's actually really mad when it's like, you brought me here for a play and we thought you had this thing. And then, of course, the central conceit, operates around the idea that even 20 years ago, there would be a situation where a colony is just out of food and needs to do God knows what with half of the population. And so, yeah, they're not at the full Captain Picard says we don't need money utopia.
Yeah, no TV.
Yeah, right. They still have TV at this point.
Still, yeah. Still a charm for me about the original series is that continuity is wonky. They're not too concerned about it,
Yeah.
They have like throwaway lines of like, that's why when he says to Spock, McCoy's like, that's why you guys were conquered so easily. And it's like, wait, what? What happened?
Right.
I'm like, I want to know more about that.
And then, of course, later they say that it was never conquered. So
yeah.
Who knows?
That's what's great is like, I'm like, is that true? I don't know.
Yeah, he's drunk.
Oh, yeah.
Still listen to him.
He could just be talking out of his ass.
I love the scene where Kirk confronts Kodos, and it is kind of, it's like if you took all the important Hamlet speeches, and then also the speech where Claudius is praying and wrestling with his conscience, and you kind of jammed them all into one scene. It's a really great scene where he confronts him. And then, of course, in this case, it isn't that the play is the thing, it's the voice test is the thing. He's like, read this speech, and we're going to analyze your voice. And as Kodos reads the speech, he slowly lets the paper drop because he knows the speech by heart.
That was awesome.
And it's so, yeah. And it's so damning. But like you said, at the same time, like he is living this life where he's pretending to be somebody else, but it's a barely sustainable fiction for him because he really just does want to get caught.
I mean, the fact that he knows that word for word also, he puts it down and he's like, he knows it. So he's clearly like thought about it a lot.
Oh yeah. He's
not just the action, but his specific actions moment to moment then,
Yeah. He lives with this every day.
Yeah. It's great. I love it.
Being that it's early TOS, we get a Uhura song, which is kind of nice. That kind of drops off as we continue. Also, as Nichelle Nichols is absent from the show because of singing commitments. But yeah, I always like it when they get the harp out and they do a little musical number.
Yeah, I was like, okay, cool. A little. I think we talked about it with like which was it? Rio Grande. There was the one where they had like multiple. Actually, both of the movies had songs. And like that was like, we need to bring that back. Of just like, we're gonna sing a song now.
Well, I'll tell you. I don't know if you watched the HBO show Euphoria, but the finale aired recently. And in it, and I won't. It's not really spoiling anything, but in it, like the show just stops as one character just sings a song that they wrote to another character about like what's going on. and I didn't like it. Big build up to me saying I felt like it didn't fit at all. So maybe this only works in the 60s.
I also don't want it to be like this is a big pivotal moment. I just like, because in the one movie it was like, and now here's some cowboys to do a song.
My rifle, my pony. And me. Yeah.
It was not like diegetic, I guess is the word. I don't know. Where it's like it didn't really like fit totally. It was just like, yeah, we're doing this now.
Right, but at the same time, it isn't like a character just begins, singing their own dialogue because this is Gallivant or whatever.
Yeah, no, we're just hanging out and it's time for the concert.
Right, yeah. I love how this ends. It ends with the trope of some characters are backstage during a show and they're trying to accomplish something, but also it's very important that the play continues, I guess, when... What we're talking about is murder, and you're the captain of the ship. So why not just walk on stage and go, all right, everybody, freeze. We got something we got to figure out here. But it's like, Riley, give me the phaser. It's like, maybe, is it that important that the play continues?
It's because he's like got a stealth up on him. You know what I mean?
Even Captain Kirk knows that it's important that this play is not is violated.
When
and
of course, talking about dealing with the main character of the play.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm going to need you to talk to you for a second. Kodos to the bridge, please.
Hopefully you got a good understudy.
And, of course, Captain Kirk would know that because William Shatner got his start at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about. He's built for this.
Yeah, he is.
People make fun of his acting, but he's...
we're past that, aren't we? Come on.
Yeah, I guess 20 years ago people made... Actually, no, someone... Oh, God, I can't remember the context, but I was talking to someone recently who did that. Oh, I saw a magician recently, and it was kind of corny, and he made reference to, like, William Shatner's acting, and he did that impression everyone used to do, and I was like, what year is it? But that was, like, most of his references. Like, he also mentioned, like, it's like smoking weed with Snoop Dogg, and I was like, all right, it's like the 90s to you. This was an older dude, so...
Did Kevin Pollak learn some magic tricks or something?
I don't want to out the guy because I appreciated.
Fair enough.
He's trying. He's just like a local magician in this place I went. So I don't want to like trash him or anything. It was fun, but it was like, man, you got to update your references.
Yeah, but it's telling that I'm sure still works for a portion of the audience. But I don't know, if I was William Shatner, a guy who has literally left Earth and has been an actor for probably 60, 65 years and has accomplished so much and whose work has made so much money for so many people. And the joke is still like, I'm talking like this. Maybe I'd be a crabby asshole too.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. The point. Yeah. Cause maybe I'm like arguing against something that people don't argue anymore, but I definitely want to point out that he is so good. And this episode is great for him. He kills it.
It's tough. It's tough to be one of these great men. Kodos, Thanos, and William Shatner.
William Shatner had to make a decision out on that stage. And we have to respect it.
Yes. Do I interrupt this play or do I?
It's too complicated to understand us as lay people. We have to just appreciate the decisions
that a starship captain has to make. Yes. Well, there isn't much technology in the world of Shakespeare, but there is in the world of Trek, and it sometimes facilitates what the characters are doing, but just as often it's the actual complication that they're dealing with. So on every show, we pick from a list of Star Trek technologies, we add what we get to the non-Trek media, and subtract it from the Trek episode to see how each would be different. We call this our technological exchange, and the list of technologies that we pick from goes like this. The list is phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drives, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and the technology of androids. And if I roll on my random number selecting technology, the result I get is number 4. If transporters existed in the world of Hamlet, how would it be different?
Well, they're mostly in one place. But they do say they go other places.
That's true. One thing that they cut out of their very expansive inclusive cut of Hamlet is the fact that when Hamlet is sent to England in the care of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, the reason that he is able to come back is that their ship is attacked by pirates. Oh. If you've got pirates and you don't put them in Hamlet, what's wrong? So
that is disappointing. Yeah,
Hamlet is like kidnapped by the pirates, but he's like, you know, a cool dude, and so the pirates are like, "You're all right. Where do you want us to drop you?" And he's like, "Oh, just drop me in, you know, Denmark." And so
that's amazing.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern then continue to England, where all the men are mad, and he has swapped out the letters that they are carrying that say, you know, kill Hamlet once we get there. And instead the letters say, kill the bearers of these letters. So he gets Rosencrantz and Guildenstern killed. Now, a lot of cuts cut that because it makes Hamlet seem like a real shit. But that's what happens in that.
Yes,
so if you
perfect.
could just, if you had a transporter, you just go, Hamlet, that's it, we're done. You stick him in the transporter, he's in England, and maybe that's the end of Hamlet.
Or you just transport him into space. And he dies.
they just beam Hamlet into space. A black-clad satellite orbiting Earth forever.
I know we were talking and we were like, hopefully we don't just have to do Hamlet in space. But I had a kind of a question for you of if you were going to adapt Hamlet into Star Trek, which series would you pick and which character would it revolve around? Like, who's Hamlet?
The answer is Captain Sisko, and the series is DS9.
Okay, Sisko's Hamlet?
Oh, if it's Hamlet specifically?
Yeah, like who, I guess, because it's always like, it would be like a side character, right? It would be like, Quark, I guess. He could be heir to the...
Oh, yeah. You can map a lot of scenarios into the Ferengi, because we just don't know that much about them other than money. Well, I think that Sisko and the things that he deals with, he is that ruler, that great
he'd
man.
be the ruler, yeah.
As far as Hamlet goes, maybe Riker, although if the endpoint of Hamlet is that he's got to stab somebody, I don't think it's Riker, because I don't think Riker, even though he's like the two-fisted guy, like I don't think he's the guy that's going to stab somebody. Riker's stories always revolve around him, like usually growing as a person and realizing that he doesn't have to like punch or stab somebody. So that's a great question. Maybe Worf.
Worf, okay.
Because Worf does kill Duras, but he's not that conflicted about it. It's basically like, oh, great, I have the opportunity to kill Duras. Dead.
Yeah, he's just like, he really marches right over there. And just
Worf's least favorite play is Hamlet. He's like, what's this guy's problem?
Yeah, what's taking so long?
Yeah. I mean, sing some more songs, sure, but then kill this guy. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about Tom Paris?
Oh, and his dad, the admiral guy.
Yeah. I mean, it could be his dad, or it could just be another scenario. But like, Tom Paris is like kind of a whiny asshole who we're told we're told has a lot of like potential and is going to be something great someday, but
we never
don't necessarily see it. And I think there's an argument to be made that Hamlet's the same way. It's like, if you're so great, how come this isn't done already? In fact, something that gets cut out of the show a lot and was cut out of the Royal Shakespeare's version is, there is this character that we hear about and we never see all the time, and that's Fortinbras. And Fortinbras is himself the child of an elder Fortinbras who was killed by elder Hamlet, and so he is a prince who is getting his revenge. He is running roughshod over Europe, and it isn't until late in the fourth act, when Hamlet is on his journey to England, that he sees Fortinbras's troops, and that's when he says, look at this. This guy is doing what I couldn't do. From now on, my thoughts be bloody. I'm resolute in my purpose. I've got to go back home and do this thing, because this prince is making me look like an asshole.
That's great. That
and so
adds
I don't know if like
layer to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if Tom Paris has any like siblings, or like could be another family that is, friends with the Paris family, but you could do something like that. Isn't there there's an episode of DS9 in the 7th season where Esri goes back to spend time with her family.
Oh, okay.
And And it's not exactly Shakespeare, but there is like a whole weird kind of family dynamic. It's almost like a Mishner novel. One of the reasons that I've never proposed it for the show is that like Mishner novels are like 1,000 pages long. Like I don't want to read that. But it's the whole idea of like this family. Think about like an HBO miniseries where it's about a Southern family, an upper class Southern family, and they've got like dark secrets and that sort of thing. And I could see like Shakespeare kind of mapping onto that too.
One thing that you mentioned Duras, and I think it would have worked to do something like that as a total side story with like the House of Duras, because you did have that one shitty kid.
Yeah.
And like the sisters would be great. I don't know.
Yeah, the kid growing up and like kind of wanting his own revenge. That's the kid could be Hotspur. That's a character in Henry IV, who is sort of the opposite number of the young Henry, who is looking for revenge and feels like he is owed something.
Yeah, I guess we've mentioned it before. Klingon and like Shakespeare, any like classical plays, I think all work really well together.
Yeah, for real.
They love revenge and stuff like that.
But transporters, though.
Sorry.
Here you go. Instead of poison, you could transport something like into King Hamlet's head, right? And if they've got transporters, but they don't have, advanced sensors, which would be under tricorders, then transporting is like, you can do it, but you don't necessarily, you can't like scan something all the way down. So you could like transport like you could transport the poison itself, or you could transport like a rock into his head. And then suddenly he's like, and he's got a splitting headache. He keels over. He dies of a stroke. And we don't know why he died. He was old. We just, it's just a stroke. But Hamlet finds the transporter logs and he realizes, oh my God, this was my father's code was used to send this transport.
There is the occasional transporter murder in the show, but it doesn't happen as much as you would think. Like, maybe they got that stuff regulated pretty well.
They would have to, I would imagine. They're stepping into it every day. Speaking of DS9 Season 7, they do that with Ezri in Season 7, where there's the assassin that has the teleporting bullet gun.
What? I'm not to that yet.
Oh, okay. I will not spoil that.
That's sweet. I've seen it, but it's been a while. That sounds awesome.
It's not as good as it could be, no. but it is a kind of cool idea, though. Yeah,
just those words alone sound great.
It's sort of like, I think it came out around the time that the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Eraser came out, so maybe we put that on the list as something that we end up doing, because Eraser also featured a gun that was a Gauss gun, a electromagnetic gun.
There was something in the air.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right, so pencil that in too. Got a lot of work ahead of us. Let's flip over to the Trek episode and remove transporters. What happens if there's no transporters in this world?
There's some transporter action here, but
we get kind of screwed because it's specifically the plot can happen because the players have to get rides on ships around the sector. And then at the beginning, Kirk calls his buddy on the Astral Queen and says, hey, go ahead and take off. Don't give these guys a ride. And so because they don't have a ride, they're forced to go on the Enterprise, which gives him more time to examine the situation.
They are just bumming rides around.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's just the life of a traveling player. So, I mean, there's always the thing of like, look, I remain resolute that I know that the transporter was invented because they couldn't afford to show the ship landing, but I think Star Trek could still exist without transporters.
Yeah, pretty much, except for like very specific episodes that are transporter based. Like certain plots would be changed, but it would remain somewhat similar, except now I feel like it's like more instant, because they have the transporters on them, so they're just like zipping around. So
you would lose the sort of last minute escapes where somebody gets beamed out of an exploding something or other.
But it would just be like a ship swooping down and
Yeah, but they had to deal with that in Enterprise a lot because there's, wasn't transporters for the first couple seasons. And so a lot of times a character would be in a situation and it's like, crap, like, how do we get them out of that situation? Like there's no transporters.
Oh, yeah. So if it took it out, it would just be Enterprise season 1.
Although the very first episode they do, for a treat, they allowed themselves to beam Archer out of a situation, and then he's like checks that everything's there, but then they never use the transporter again for like a whole season.
Oh, they're like, we got to work on that some more.
Yeah, only in an extreme emergency.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I think this episode really revolves around them being in like 2 places.
Yeah. Do you think that well, I guess now we know, thanks to Discovery, that, transporters is no problem. Got them. Oh, and also Enterprise. So there would have been transporters on Tarsus 4 20 years ago.
For sure, yeah.
But not in this world. So...
Would anyone survive?
Yeah, how would transporters have hurt that?
Because did they really discuss how everyone else made it out alive, That's
a good question. Did we find a episode that is totally proof to our... The answer is it would just be the same?
I think it might be, and I think we could award it some sort of medal.
You win. The conscience of the king.
Well, that's
backtracking proof.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there is some tech in this, but this is one where I feel like you could transplant it to different eras, and it wouldn't take much.
Star Trek. Yeah,
Star Trek, or even just like I said, it could be in the past of now.
Star Trek isn't above. Yeah. Star Trek isn't above stealing from itself. So, like, maybe someday they'll try to like redo something like the Conscience of the King, just with either older or newer Star Trek technology.
I could see them pulling it off because I don't know, or not pulling it off, but I could see them attempting it.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, or doing the Macbeth that we talked about, or something like that.
Yeah, but then again, that might be a monkey's paw situation.
Yeah, the finger curls.
Yeah.
Well, you did it. Conscience of the King. You exempt from the technological exchange as a, they talk about in, the film 2001, right? When the Moonwatcher throws the bone up and then the bone becomes a space station. It is one of the longest temporal cuts in film history. It literally cuts millions of years to the future.
Yeah.
This is a version of that, in that taking a play that was written over 400 years ago and then redoing it 700 years later, it has made itself criticism-free, proof of any kind of criticism about the use of technology in this, a very basic, very relatable story in the future.
Yeah, people say it's like some people say Shakespeare's timeless. Maybe there's something to it. This could exist anytime.
Other than the ray guns and the aliens, maybe Trek is just as timeless.
Oh my God. It'll be, if people are living when... I can't wait for them to look at this in the future, if it still exists, and see what they have to say.
Assuming nothing goes wrong.
That's a big assumption.
Yeah, yeah. But like the first person who... opens up their overnight bag on the moon will definitely be thinking about Star Trek, right? Like we do it now. Jeff Bezos is the guy who's going to pay for the whole thing, and he's obsessed with Star Trek. So as we go out into space, we will be taking Star Trek with us. And I want to know what the first person who, lives on another planet overnight. I guess the Apollo astronauts slept on the moon, but you know what I mean. I want to know what he'll think when he watches these cardboard sets and these guys, with girdles in their colored T-shirts. And like if they think it's silly, or if they think, they had the right idea, they're headed in the right direction.
It might come around too, where that spray bottle thing seems normal again.
I want to know if they'll have spray bottles in lunar gravity. Yeah. Well, should we tell people what's coming up on the next episode of Backtracking?
Yeah. You have to clue me in. I forgot what this is, but we're talking about the Voyager episode Night, and its relation to, I don't know this. It's a comic called Aniara.
It is a film that is based on a poem. Wait, come back. It is a Swedish sci-fi film based on an epic poem, and well, I don't want to say more than that, but I guess I could. And it is about a disastrous space journey. It's a very melancholy film, and it relates to Voyager in a way that I don't think that we explore in Trek a lot, which is space is scary. Not just the aliens and the black holes, but also just the nothingness and what that does to a crew. Something that doesn't get dealt with nearly enough in Voyager, but for this one episode, they decide that they need to talk about like how it's rough out here.
Okay, well that'll be perfect coming from this, because we're just talking about how it's a little different than your average Trek, so that's kind of the theme we got going.
Yeah, Trek doing a left turn. That's what we're talking about. So we'll be talking about that on our next episode, but that is it for this episode, and thanks for listening. And if you like the show, tell a friend about it. You can follow us at Backtrekking on Twitter. You can tell us, too, what you think that we should look at in future episodes, and any suggestions that you might have, any piece of media that you think inspired a Trek episode, or even the other way around. Let us know on social media at Backtrekking. Gooey, tell the people where they can find you online.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at GUIFame.
And I am at KA1IBAN on Twitter. And you can find all of the shows on the Just Enough Trope Network at Just Enough Trope on Twitter. And that's it for us for this week. We'll see you soon. And until then, keep on trekking.